Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Butcher Shop, where the meat meets the water. On this episode, Doug McKnight takes a break from permit fishing to break down one of his signature patterns, the Home Invader. We discuss its creation, how to fish it, how to tweak it, and much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. But before we get to the interview, just a couple of housekeeping items. To make sure you don't miss a single episode of The Butcher Shop, be sure to subscribe in the podcatcher of your choice. We're only distributing episodes on the Articulate Fly for a limited time. And if you like the podcast, please tell a friend and subscribe and leave us a rating and review in the podcatcher of your choice. It really helps us out. And finally, a shout out to our sponsor, Trout Routes. We all know streams are getting crowded, and chances are you're not the only one at your local access point. Get away from the crowds and busy gravel lots by using Trout Routes Pro with over 350,000 access points mapped across 50,000 trout streams and much more. Trout Routes has all the data you need to help you find angling opportunities that others will overlook. Up your game and download the app today. Use code ARTFLY20, ARTFLY20, all one word, for 20% off of your Trout Routes Pro membership at maps.troutroutes.com. And a shout out to our friends at Schultz Outfitters. Schultz Outfitters is Southern Michigan's premier fly and tackle shop, and the guys at Schultz Outfitters are some of the fishiest dudes on the planet. Book a day on the water, swing by the shop, or check out one of their mini classes taught by some of the best anglers and tyers in the game today. Check them out at schultzoutfitters.com or give them a shout at 734-544-1761. Now, on to our interview. Well, Doug, welcome to the Butcher Shop.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation. You have to let folks know you're in a pretty exotic location. I think this is the most exotic location I've ever recorded a guest from. Why don't you clue people in?
Well, we're totally off the grid outside for satellite internet. We're in Blacksmith Lodge in Punta Herrera, Mexico.
And how's the fishing been?
It's been unbelievable. Not so much in how many fish we're catching, but how we're catching them.
Super cool. And it's just permit, right?
Well, there's big tarpon here. There's plenty of bonefish and some gagger snook. I mean, it's kind of the world of opportunity down here for sure.
Very, very cool. And so, folks, last time we had the folks from SA on to talk about line design. We're kind of going back to the original format where it's one pattern, one fly designer, and all the questions. And so tonight we're going to talk to Doug about the Home Invader. And, Doug, if we step back in the time machine, what was the hole in your fly box you were trying to fill when you started working on the Home Invader?
Well, it wasn't necessarily a hole in a fly box because we're, tying absolutely anything and everything we could. But, certainly some people doing some innovative stuff. I grew up just outside of Philadelphia, so I was fishing for trout as an aspiring striper fisherman. And, getting in the smallmouth, getting in the streamer fishing. And Bob Popovics was coming out with, new innovative streamers that were using different materials than anybody else. I mean, using wool, doing these wool head sculpted flies that were, looked exactly like baitfish. And I was getting into, striper and smallmouth fishing and, been all about catching minnows my entire life. And just where I worked, it was, some materials on the wall and some materials that I had taken, from a rooster pheasant, one of the last rooster pheasants that I shot in PA for my granddad's farm right before he sold it. And it kind of happened by accident.
Yeah, interesting. And so, who are some of the kind of the anglers and tyers that kind of inspired the design in addition to Bob?
Certainly Bob Clouser, with the inverted, lead eyes. I mean, talk about revolutionary stuff. I mean, a fly that swims upside down is essentially snagless. That for sure, plus what Bob Popovics was doing with, New Jersey striped bass and bluefish and whatever. I mean, some of the stuff that he was coming up with, different materials, tying with wool, tying with different hair. That kind of got me going for sure.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Popovic's is, it's interesting because I've talked to other folks about this. I mean, he was figuring all this stuff out and literally like going to the hardware store, right?
Right.
And I can remember watching him tie those wool-headed streamers, and he literally was sitting in Edison, and he had a tube of silicone goop that you would buy, at Home Depot or Lowe's.
Right. And we still do that today. I mean, with what we're doing currently, I mean, none of that has changed.
Yeah, I think some of the young kids are spoiled because I think they just order everything in a catalog now, right?
Well, I mean, yes, but if they knew about those other things that they need at the hardware store, they'd go to the hardware store if they knew.
Yeah, it's kind of like trolling the craft shops for time materials, right?
Right. 100%. It's all the same.
Yeah. And so, talk a little bit about kind of the bite trigger you were trying to kind of build into the Home Invader when you were designing it.
Well, there was no epiphany as far as, where I was going with a certain pattern. I had certainly seen what, my neighbor in New Jersey was doing with striped bass and, I mean, other stuff. And he was imitating baitfish. And I was imitating baitfish. And I was basically a kid crawling around in southeast Pennsylvania without a home trout stream to spend my time on, but yet the lower Yellowstone or lower Delaware River, which is smallmouth land, striper land, and a bunch of coarse fish and, shad in the springtime. And if you go way up top, it's trout land. And where all these places meet, I kind of snuck onto this Spring Creek, just north of my house where I lived, 40-minute drive, and nobody fished this thing. And I would basically sneak in from where it met the Delaware. And, there was a paper company that owned the bottom end. And I would sneak up there and trout fish that. And I would also catch smallmouth. And I also caught stripers and saw some big stripers in there coming in and wreaking herd on what I wanted to catch with flies. So, it was about imitating baitfish and minnows. And I knew it was in there, black-nosed dace, little eastern sand darters. And, I just had this wonderful material, at my feet that I'd killed and taken samples of from my grandfathers, which was the marabou off of a ringneck pheasant, off their thighs, if you will. And there's not many blood marabou plumes on a rooster pheasant, but there's some. And, got a couple of granddad's roosters on his property, before he sold it. And I'm like, these are special feathers. I'm going to save them. These things are wonderful. I got to find a use for them. And at the same time, I was working for a dude, had a very small fly shop, a really shy beatnik dude named Ken Schwam. And he had, he went pegboard to organize his material. So he had all kinds of stuff hanging up. And he had a fully tanned Australian possum skin just hanging up right behind the tine bench, hardly been trimmed on. And it's a beautiful skin, a beautiful fur, a lot like rabbit, but coarser and more translucent and just magical stuff. And the hide is super thin compared to rabbit. I mean, you can cut a strip off of this thing and wrap it, and there is no bulk at all. And dense, translucent hair that goes all the way from graphite gray to peach to tan to rust, all in the same skin, and every single one of them is different. And honestly, it was looking at that and looking at this, and I'm like, we're going to do a tail of marabou, a set of Clouster eyes, And we're going to fill around the lead eyes with this fur, this beautiful fur. And we can control the color and make it just like the fucking minnows in this creek. And I remember tying the first few, and we used Cree hackles because, I mean, you know, anytime you're tying a trout fly and you can put a Cree hackle in there, why wouldn't you? Because that stuff is solid gold. I mean, it's a genetic miscreant, and super rare and super fun and super effective. And so we did ringneck pheasant tail marabou out the back, lead eyes like a clouser, and fur around the lead eyes, and then cup in a couple hackles right over the top of the lead eyes with a little bit of flash. And I remember quite distinctly the brown trout in the spring creek that I'm not supposed to fish. I am poaching at this point. But I'm 18 years old. I can get away with this. And they came absolutely unglued for it. And we took it down to smallmouth land, just downstream from there. I mean, just not even a mile, and caught a bunch of smallmouth. And it's like, dude, we're imitating baitfish. This is what we're doing, and we got a good one.
Very, very neat. Any kind of materials as you kind of tinkered on the kind of the, I guess, quote, final design that didn't make the cut?
Well, we're not set on the final design. It's, I mean, just like any good work, it's a work in progress. But yes, instead of the Aussie possum, which only works really good for the small little natural creek ones, we started using different material, different marabou, you know, instead of the pheasant marabou, which you only get a couple of feathers per bird. You know, you can use turkey marabou and use whatever color you want to, in whatever size you want to. You can get much bigger marabou there. And then, well, we need a bigger fur than Aussie possum. Well, what's the next best one? It's Arctic foxtail or red foxtail or gray foxtail or even a coyote if you want to. And you can get as big as you need to with them. And it's not just a trout fly. It's not just a smallmouth fly. It's any fish that wants the minnow, because you can scale it up or scale it down. You can put 2 hooks in it. You can put 1 big hook in it and make it 6 inches long.
Yeah, and so, you know, if you are generally imitating bait fish, do you generally stick to kind of natural color combinations, or do you kind of have natural and then kind of attractor color patterns you like?
Oh, no, for sure. Definitely attractor color patterns too. You know, my take on color, trout fishing, maybe smallmouth bass fishing. The dirtier the water, the brighter I want the fly. The clearer the water, the more I want it muted, subdued. And that's where, like, that pheasant marabou, which is unbelievable stuff. You can get it. If you have a friend that shoots pheasants, get him to save you every feather that he can, because it's solid gold. But you can do it in any color.
Yeah, that's interesting because it makes me think, you know, with you being, you know, in Montana, not now, but normally, you know, bird season is coming up. So everybody needs to get their
Yes.
orders into their buddies, right?
Right.
And we just started dove season too. So that's a good place to pick up a few feathers.
Oh, my goodness. Absolutely.
So you had mentioned a 2-hook variation. I know all of the tying nerds are going to want to know kind of your preferred way to secure that second hook.
I would say, for me lately, I haven't found a better way than some like 30-pound Berkeley wire and a couple of beads. And what you want to do with those beads, you know, in between the 2 hooks, you know, I would say heavy. I mean, for me, where I fish, it's heavy because we're dealing with heavy, violent water, and that's where we do good. A fly that'll, you know, get down and stay down, track down and stuff, but, you know, you don't have to make it that heavy. But yes, there is definitely a 2-hook version of it.
And do you have a preferred, like some preferred size configurations, front hook, back hook, that you want to share with folks?
You know, honestly, since the Kelly Gallup revolution, as far as articulated flies, my flies have consistently gotten smaller since then. You know, back in the day, back 20 years ago, when I was, fishing my water, you had an advantage with a bigger fly. You were showing them something different. And those days are gone. So everything is shrunken, small to where we're now not only tiny, but tiny and articulated. And that's fun. I mean, that's the way things go.
Yeah, so you're tying like smaller stinger hooks on the back, right?
Yes. Pair of sixes, pair of eights, pair of lead eyes, same rig, 7/8 weight, 250, 300 grain line, and trying to fish some heavy water on my river. That is a consistent marker for good fishing. The heavier the water, the better. And, a fly that you can fish fast and you can fish slow. And what I mean by slow is like the fly has its own action, whether you're stripping or not. Because there is an advantage to a slow moving fly in really, really fast water. Because, I mean, think about it from the fish's perspective. You're a 20-inch brown trout sitting in screaming fast water to get away from all the bullshit, right? Everything is a maelstrom at that point, right? And you're seeing stuff in that fast water. You're sitting on a screaming fast seam. I'm sorry. And, everything's a blur. And here comes a dude fly fishing, throwing a streamer, maybe throwing an articulated streamer, maybe throwing a single hook streamer, and the fly's moving fast in that screaming fast water that looks like a maelstrom. You might not see it. You might not catch it. And if you did, you might chase it. Oh, I got to chase, right? But if you were in that same water with a fly that moved on itself and you were fishing it slow and you covered it more, you give that fish a chance to fucking bite it. And they're there. But the circumstances around where that fish lives and what you got to do it, you need a slow moving fly that still looks good, still gets bit. And, a fly like the Home Invader that's got, every single thing outside of the hook and the lead eyes, the flash, the hackles, the marabou, the fur, they all move. It looks alive. Like you can just drag it in the current. It looks alive. A fly that fishes good slow. There's a lot of trout streamers and streamers in general that fish good fast, but does your fly fish good slow? In those greasy spots where, stuff gets bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of times people don't understand, the decision a big fish has to make to kind of, for lack of a better word, to swim up in the tornado to go chase a fly. And that makes it a lot harder, right?
And, particularly these days where, these fish are premium and they're being fished to. And, where those fish go when they're pressured, they get into extremely difficult spots that, you're going by in even a properly rowed drift boat. Maybe you get one cast in there. If you fucking blink or make a cast in the wrong spot, you're not even showing them the fly.
Yeah, I've had some of those boat arguments before with guides, right? Missing the shot.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, because they saw it and maybe we didn't, and stuff gets sideways.
Yeah, or you find those like eddies where you're coming down a fast trough and you got to kind of cast back behind the boat as you kind of come through, and if you don't get it right, you're kind of screwed. So
yeah. And honestly, my home fishery, we have a lot of fast water on the Yellowstone, in Paradise Valley and below. And when things get tougher, those fish move up, and those move up spots. If you're not at the top of the spot, you're not getting even 20% of it. And if they're in that back 20%, maybe you got a shot. But like if you didn't show it to them the whole way, I mean, that's what it takes these days to get one of these things.
Yeah, it's amazing how much fishing pressure has increased. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Even I think we were talking before we started recording, and I'm always amazed now. You go kind of what I would consider late, like late September, October, and you go by Kelly's place on the Upper Madison, and they're like 25 boats dropping.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of nuts, really.
Right.
But back to the Home Invader. Tell me, if you see some common mistakes people make when they tie the fly, either with the way they tie the eyes in, or weight the fly, or proportions, or things like that. That our tying buddies would love to know.
I would say the most common mistake is too much like fox hair or a possum hair, whatever hair you want to tie it. I mean, you can tie it with whatever kind of hair you want to, but if you use too much, it, clogs up the eye of the hook, makes the next step, which is tying the hackles and the flash in, maybe a little bit more tough, and it really doesn't make a better fly to swim. The more hair you put on there, the more it drags. The more you want it down in fast water, the more it stays up. So, it's not a super durable fly, tied right, but it's, a fly that'll get reasonably down and push some water and show that it's alive and something to eat, and something for these fish to eat.
Yeah. Any tricks for like the way you like to secure the eyes you can share with folks?
Yeah, for sure. Put down, beat a Zap-A-Gap and take some lead wire and put some lead wire down, and then tie your eyes over that lead wire, with a bunch of thread with the figure eight method, and squeeze it down with definitely some Zap-A-Gap is the way to go. I mean, head cement is great, but it's a varnish, where Zap-A-Gap is, pretty damn solid.
Yeah. Super glue will set you free, right?
Right.
So, it sounds like you, at least on the Yellowstone, you generally like to fish the Home Invader in like the bottom third of the water column. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends on just the time of year and, when you're doing it. I mean, personally, when I get to do it a bunch, me personally, is, say late February through the beginning of runoff, the beginning of Mother's Day caddis. So, me personally, when I get to fish and get to do it with a sink dip line, a 250 on a 7-weight or a 300 on an 8, and, whatever size and color, you want to fish for the water you got. And we can be anywhere from, 1,000 CFS to 6,000 CFS at that time of year, and muddy and fucking cold and 6,000, or cold and 38 degrees, but it's a magical time of year to fish. And it really just depends, but generally the dirtier the water, the brighter I go, the clearer the water, which is generally the earlier part of that, as we're coming out of winter, the more natural I am. Olives, tans, blacks for sure in the wintertime. And then as we get more mud in the system, which is not a bad thing, mud is excellent. We just need the good mud. Maybe we're going more towards like a yellow or a bright olive or a brighter fly, that does better in the murky water.
And what's your favorite leader setup?
I'm usually fishing a sink tip with them. Not always, but usually. So, 24-foot sink tip, 250, 300, butt section, 15-pound Maxima to whatever, fluorocarbons if you want to, 12 to 20-pound test. So the whole, 3-foot, 15, 20-pound Maxima, 3-foot of whatever tippet you want to, tied with a loop knot. Free and easy.
Yeah, got it. And so, we talked about you can fish the Home Invader fast, but it excels at slow. Talk a little bit about how you like to animate the fly when you fish your home waters.
Well, I would say what I tell people when they climb in my boat, the few times that I get, good streamer fishermen in my boat, I would say the faster the water, the slower you want to move the fly. And when I say slow, if it's fast enough, cast it out there, get tight to it with that sink tip, get it down, use the whole head of the line and just stay tight to it. Let that fly swim. And I call it the do nothing. And we catch a lot of fish like that. If you're in some in-between water that's maybe moving more moderate to medium, slow, fish those fast spots, cover those seams, those good areas. And then it's a stop and go, where you get it down, you get it to those good spots, you're tight to it. If you get a bite, you'll feel it. And then, maybe as you get a little bit of swing on the line, maybe the strip boat's moving a little bit slow if you got a good rower. And it's a stop and go at that point where you strip it a couple times, maybe sink it down a little bit more, strip it back a couple times, all the way to the boat, all the way to where we have clear water and warmer water temperatures where the fish are more active and more apt to chase. And when I say chase, sometimes the chase is you're just moving it too fast, and the reason they didn't bite it is because you're moving too fast. You need it slower. But the times when you're moving at that medium speed and you're moving fish, but you're not getting them, maybe move it faster. Maybe they want it faster. And certainly the warmer times of the year in clear water, there are times when you really want to be moving it pretty quick to show it it's real. Because if it's moving too slow and they have that much time to react to it, like, that's not working. So it really just depends on the time of the year. But I would say, if you have a fly that you can fish slow and be in the game, you're covering more water, you're taking advantage of situations, and generally, maybe that translates into a more bite or two.
Yeah, and backing up to your do nothing retrieve, are you swinging it almost like the old school streamer way, or are you doing?
Hell yeah,
yeah.
No, I mean you could take one of these flies. I mean, maybe instead of a single hook version where it's tied up front like a clouser, maybe you'd want it in the back. You could swing up fish with this fly for sure. It does. It swims on its own.
Yeah. And I was just trying to figure out if you were swinging or if you were maybe mending it to get it to kind of stall a little bit and actually not really move at all.
100%. Absolutely every time out of the drift boat. I'm trying to do that.
Got it. And it's interesting.
And also too, I mean, it depends on the time of year. And there are times when I'm stripping that, super hard and really moving it as soon as it hits the water. But there are a lot of times where I'm throwing it out there in a good spot, using that sinking line and just getting down, getting tight and letting the fly do its thing.
Yeah, very neat.
Swing.
Yeah, absolutely. Very neat. And it's interesting too, right? Because, we've had this tremendous evolution in fly lines, right? And I remember having this conversation with Russ about the peanut where, you have so many more options to adjust the weight of the eyes and the fly and the lead wraps to tandem with the fly line. And, I don't know if you tinker a lot with that or you deal with people that do, but I was kind of wondering if you could kind of give people thoughts about use a heavier line, like maybe like a triple density line and maybe take some of the weight out of the fly or kind of things that they could play around with to get kind of different presentations.
For sure. And that's definitely all on the table. And in preface to that, I tie, medium-sized bead chain, single hook Home Invaders and do very well with them at certain times. Bright days, non-bright days. And it's definitely super important to have kind of everything. Have everything from light to, dredge stuff in your box and everything in between. Because you don't know what it's going to be like out there.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing too, right, is you can almost get to a place where like you have inherent jig action in the Home Invader, but you can also kind of fish it almost a little bit like a swim fly if you weight it lightly enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, that's honestly where that fly kind of shines is like when you're not doing too much to it, when you have just enough weight to it to get it to the zone where you want to, and you fucking swim it. That's where that fly shines.
Yeah, because I would assume, right, you give it slack and it's going to drop, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you don't really need a lot of weight per se.
Right. And dude, the other really cool, um, you know, 15 years ago, I started getting more and more into saltwater fishing and more into tarpon fishing. That is certain respects. There's many facets of tarpon fishing, many facets of backcountry fishing. But at the end of the day, they're fishing baitfish. We're fishing baitfish, right? Could we morph the Home Invader into a fly that would work really well for tarpon? And we did it. And instead of, you know, trout fishing dealing with heavy current, we want some lead eyes on there to get under that current and, get tight. Where with a lot of tarpon and backcountry fishing, it's a light fly. You're fishing a heavy fluorocarbon shock tippet that'll drag your stuff down to a couple feet, after a few strips. But generally speaking, most tarpon flies, most backcountry flies for snook, whatever, they're weightless. And we effectively turned the Home Invader into one hell of a tarpon fly. And not to toot my own horn, but how many, new tarpon flies out there? I mean, the last real great one was like, the Tasty Toad, Gary Merriman, which is up on a level. I mean, I got to fish that thing before a lot of people knew about it. And I was like, holy moly, this thing works. And, even with the streamer fishing that we did, trout fishing, smallmouth bass fishing, it's in a lot of respects the same thing what other guys are doing, tarpon, backcountry fishing, snook fishing, and boy does it work. The difference is, Home Invader's got heavy lead eyes, home slice, weightless fly, plastic eyes, same format, but Home Invader swims upside down, Clouser style. Home slice swims right side up with no weight, equally effective and absolutely deadly.
Got it. And so really, if we kind of zero in the fact that we're going to imitate bait fish, that really kind of tells tyers everything they need to know to multi-purpose the Home Invader for whatever non-trout species they want to chase, right?
Right. I've tied them for peacock bass. I mean, if it eats a minnow, it will eat that fly.
Neat. And so, before I let you go this evening, I know, it's been a while since you designed the Home Invader, but
30 years.
Yeah, I was trying to be nice, right?
I'm not that old.
I think
I designed it when I was 2.
Yeah, I think we're actually of a similar vintage, and I've actually got a birthday on Monday. But
happy birthday!
I appreciate that. But I know you guys are always like tinkering with stuff and playing with stuff, either whether you're trying to solve a tying problem or you've got a new material,
big time.
Or there's a new fishing problem. Anything like that you want to share with our listeners?
Well, I'm actually in Punta Herrero, Mexico right now, and I'm fishing for permit at a new lodge that's kick-ass. It's called Blacksmith. And so, I mean, it's been done a bunch before, but done with, I don't think, this kind of consistency. We're going permit fishing with dry flies and doing insanely well to the point of where I don't quite know what to do when it's my turn to fish.
That's a good problem to have. You want to elaborate a little bit?
Yes. So there's a lot of sargassum weed, which is a free floating. It's not an algae. It's a leaf forming and flower forming organism that open ocean, and there are all kinds of critters that live in this sargassum out in the middle of the open ocean, nowhere near a permit flat, maybe a marlin flat, out in 3,000 feet of water. But there's so much of it out there that during the summer months in the Gulf of Mexico, this stuff piles up, catches the trade winds and heads east towards Belize, Mexico, Bahamas, Nicaragua, Honduras, Mexico, all these places, and it's full of food. There are indigenous shrimp and crabs that their only job is to live in the sargassum, and they look just like it. They are blended into this. And when these giant mats of weeds go into the shallow water, you know what the fish do. They start looking at it and start seeing food in it and start keying in on what's living in the sargassum. And it's to the point of where now I tie a lot of permit flies and a lot of saltwater flies. A lot of what I'm tying for a permit is geared around this sargassum. And, I had done this for a little bit and heard some things like, hey, wow, this is super impressive what you're doing. And this week, just got to come down here to Mexico and experience it myself. And it will, quite frankly, melt your face. I've done a bunch of permit fishing with sinking flies, where you're down and tight and working for the bite on the strip, subsurface. And today we did nothing but fish a floating crab for permit and had fish come up and chow it. And I'm trying to wrap my head around it right now. And I'll probably do better tomorrow. But today, who knows?
Yeah, that's awesome. Any kind of, new materials or anything like that?
It's very much out there on the, front part of the weight, but 6 millimeter fly foam and a set of really good claws and legs and eyes and antenna where that permit looks up. And I've seen it. I've never seen it before, but I've seen it a bunch in the past week since I've been there, where these fish, just a permit cruising. 10 years ago, we were all throwing Merkins or maybe a different fly. Same fish. And now we're throwing a fly that runs on top and move it a certain way, and they're looking up and coming up and biting it. And a lot of times, unfortunately for me, in a shocking fashion that leaves your mouth, your bottom jaw on the ground and frozen.
It's a good problem to have. Is there anything else going on you want to? Yeah. Is there anything else going on you want to share with our listeners?
Not really. No, I don't think so.
Got it. So you'll head back in a couple days and anchor in down in Livingston for fall and winter.
Yes. Finish up the fall guide season in Livingston. We don't have too much to go. Certainly looking forward to it. And then it's bird season, and then it's wood splitting time, and and then we start the whole process over again. After the first of the year.
Yeah. So you enjoy actually having Livingston to yourself for a few months, right, with no tourists.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, it takes, I guess, until October for the people from California to go home?
Yeah, they're kind of done. It kind of depends on what happens in October. Ideally, a first week October, 22 degrees and, ice and maybe a little bit of snow, and but hey, however it shakes out, however the weather shakes out, whenever the snowbirds go home, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's just when.
Yeah, we'll just hear you chuckling in your hot chocolate.
Yes, sir.
So if folks want to follow your adventures at the Vice, on the water, and in the field, where should they go?
Probably my Instagram. Probably not a better spot than that, which is Doug_McKnight.
Well, there you go. Easy enough. I'll drop it in the show notes. And Doug, I appreciate you taking some time out this evening to chat with me from an exotic location.
Oh, dude, 100%. Great stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Take care.
All right. See ya.
Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed the interview as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Before we leave you, one more thing. If you listen to the podcast, you know about trout routes. If you fished Midwest lakes, you owe it to yourself to check out its sister app, Onyx Fish Midwest. Onyx Fish takes the guesswork out of finding new places to fish. Search and filter by species, size, and abundance, plus get local details and background info so you can show up with a plan A and as many backup plans as you want. Make the most of your time on the water. Head over to onyxmaps.com today. And remember, links to all this episode's sponsors are in the show notes. Check them out. Fish hard, folks.